horror meets delusion and fanaticism, when the most tormented mind tries to find reason amidst chaos. When love and hate blend into lust for abuse, you get the Stephen King multiverse. Here, the greatest challenge is the very act of survival, and the faint-hearted will be the first to be compromised. Villains here, big or small, are a class apart. What's more unique is his creation of villains, who are ordinary human beings, leading ordinary lives, looking rather unsuspecting, and yet these are ticking time bombs, far crazier than any supernatural entity that the author is normally credited for crafting. So without much ado, let's dive into the 10 most evil human villains that make Stephen King movies a boiling broth of madness. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. Jack Torrance, The Shining, 1980. Former school teacher Jack Torrance is an aspiring writer recovering from alcoholism. He now lives with his wife Wendy and son Danny while working for the Overlook Hotel for the winter. Torrance is a troubled man who slips into a limbo of madness after succumbing to cabin fever and evil entities surrounding the hotel. The book explores how an inherently good but flawed man is exploited by the hotel, leading to his downfall as well as redemption. In the film, however, Jack is a pathologically merciless killer who lusts for violence and blood. He has a list of criminal offenses attached to his psychological profile, including attempted familicide, murder, vandalism, domestic abuse, stalking, adultery, and some even speculate the possibility of child sexual abuse. He has hurt his son's arms and is pretty much without any remorse. As for his wife, she is forced to always walk on eggshells around him. After Wendy locked him up in the pantry, Jack spirals further. He is a racist, misogynistic wretch who terrorizes the whole place. With a fatal axe in hand, he has become a slave to the Overlook's will, and he swears to the ghosts that he will take care of the problem, his problem being the existence of his family. He enjoys hunting down his own family as they run away and hide from him. He sadistically taunts his wife like a helpless prey, while breaking the bathroom door behind which they took shelter. Armed with a feral mind and brutish strength, he emerges as the ultimate villainous murderer when he smiles while brutally axing. Halloran, none but the horror maestro, Stephen King, could have conceived a killer as deadly and deranged as Johnny. And director Stanley Kubrick does a fantastic job giving life to one of the most iconic villains on screen.
I'm so sorry.
Isaac Connor, Children of the Corn, 1984. An evil priest, Isaac Connor is the leader of the Children of the Corn, a death cult full of kids who worship a demonic being. They call him He Who Walks Behind the Rose. While he is the secondary antagonist in the franchise, he has a horde of crimes he has been accused of: assault, mass murder, use of dark magic, corruption, and even terrorism. Abuse of power comes as naturally to him as preaching, and he has this destructive energy which finds expression in torture, animal cruelty, and vandalism. In the film, Isaac not only arranged for the massacre of Gatlin's adults, he also brainwashed the children with his religious fanaticism. His plans of sanctifying the city as a holy place makes him a tyrannical usurper who seals the borders and controls the residents. Malachi Boardman, who comes next in the chain of command, is installed as the enforcing leader of the occupation, barely a year after his genocide. When outsiders Bert and Vicky pass through the town, Isaac will abduct them, only to offer them for sacrifice. But Malachi betrays Isaac, and the latter is tricked into being the sacrifice. When he finally meets his God, he is taken. But then he does come back, only to kill Malachi before disappearing completely. 25 years old, John Franklin does a great job in playing the teen preacher. Fearless and convincing, Isaac is infamous for some of the brutal punishments he devises. He calls himself a loyal minion and would go to any length to justify himself. Manipulation, fanaticism, witchcraft, immortality, dark powers. Isaac Connor is surely one of the best in the lineage of intimidating villains from the Stephen King franchise.
They just cheated us! This isn't fair! He didn't get out of the cock-a-doodle!
Annie Wilkes, Misery, 1987. Based on Stephen King's 1987 novel, Misery is a brutal psychological horror from the 90s. Formerly a nurse, Annie Wilkes is a completely demented sick weirdo whose existence is what nightmares are made of. Born in 1943, she is almost 44 years old and a control freak. Her character was actually influenced by Janine Jones, a real-life pediatric nurse who was later found responsible for overdosing hundreds of babies at the ward. her madness spills over her favorite author, Paul Sheldon, who she is pathologically obsessed over. She even named her pet sow pig, Misery, a tribute to Misery Chastain, her all-time favorite fictional character. She would go to any length to force Sheldon into reviving the lead character of Misery in his series. She has murdered her father, roommate, a number of patients, and even infants during her service. Can Paul Sheldon escape a familiar fate, also called the Dragon Lady? She has a history of abduction, torture, mutilation, and killing. The book takes the horror a notch higher and shows her as attempting enforced cannibalism and animal cruelty. She has burnt whole houses with people filled in it and pushed people down the stairs. You know what's crazier? She holds a very rigid moral code that she expects others to abide by. She was diagnosed by forensic psychologist Reed Malloy to be a walking catalog of all kinds of mental disorders, including bipolarity, schizotypal, and obsessive-compulsive disorder. As a recluse, her coping mechanisms are binge eating and self-harm. She was ranked number 17 on AFI's 100 Years, 100 Heroes and Villains. And this was also the first time a Stephen King adaptation won an award for acting. Her nursing skills, expertise in weaponry, and intimidation makes her a walking and talking lethal weapon.
You're a woman now.
Why didn't you tell me, Ma?
Margaret White, Carrie, 1976. Margaret White is a batshit crazy woman in her 40s who is all consumed by her Christian orthodoxy. The film revolves around the toxic mother-daughter relationship, which takes a tragic and deadly turn towards the end. Not only has Margaret never taught Carrie about periods, she makes a whole fuss about it. She then locks the little girl in a prayer room where she has to repent for the sin. This toxic old lady also labels Carrie as a witch when Carrie discovers her telekinetic powers while fighting off her bullies in school. After a whole massacre at the prom, Margaret reveals that Carrie was conceived as a result of rape, and she even admits to enjoying the ordeal. Not the best thing to say to your daughter. What happened to makeup and Barbie in good old cartoons? In a final act of betrayal, Margaret stabs Carrie in the back and follows her downstairs just to stab her again. What struck me as really odd was this constant, creepy smile she has on her lips. But before she can stab her daughter again, Carrie grabs a knife, pins Margaret's hands into the wall, and crucifies her. You know what? Margaret scarily lets out painful yet smiling screeches as she succumbs to the fatality. Carrie has no choice but to burn the whole house down, along with herself and her mother in it. Margaret's story is one where the protector becomes your abuser, and you never learn where love ends and the torture begins. Although it is not a supernatural horror, with monsters and mysterious entities catching up on you. Carrie is the story of a disturbed woman whose only redemption lay in burning in the hellfire that she so dreads. Warden Samuel Norton, The Shawshank Redemption, 1994. Corrupt and heartless, Samuel Norton is the ruthless warden of the Shawshank State Prison. He doesn't really have a character arc. He has a mean heart, and that's how it'll stay to the very end. This thug is the main villain of Stephen King's novel, Rita Hayworth, in Shawshank Redemption, and its 1994 film adaptation, The Shawshank Redemption. He was a corrupt and heartless warden of Shawshank State Prison. During the film, Norton's character arc doesn't change very much until the final moments of his screen time. What has he not done? Organized crime, money laundering, tax evasions, embezzlement, blackmail, extortion, obstructing justice, and even murder and serial proxy rape. His unlawful imprisonments and harsh punishments make him a cunning little evil genius who can surf through anything and everything. Whoever catches him and exposes his crimes is in for a great disaster, like Tommy, who got killed. But he does fail in preventing Andy Dufresne from clearing his own name. Thus, word of Norton's crime became public, and he had no choice but to shoot himself in the head. Why? Because he has done the inmates dirty for years at an end, and they aren't going to let him go that easy once they find him on the other side of the prison bars. Overall, his authority, charisma, strategy, and gunmanship, along with his intelligence and disciplinary methods, make him one hell of a terrifying villain. And that too from a film that is one of the best rated films of all time. Rose the Hat, Dr. Sleep, 2019. Rose O'Hara, aka Rose the Hat, is one of the underrated villains of the Stephen King multiverse. Like her predecessor in The Shining, Rose is a troubled woman, but the monsters in her head are very different from that of Torrance. Hailing from County Antrim in Northern Ireland, she is the leader of the True Knot, a cult that is preoccupied with preserving youth from steam. This cult works like a group of bloodthirsty vampires who feed on the life force of children who are gifted with the shining, 6 feet with high cheekbones and eyes that are set wide. Rose shows pristine beauty and promiscuous charm in her mid-20s. The 2019 film projects her as a sadistic, narcissistic bitch/Mitch who had only pawns and no friends. But again, then you also see her falling for Crow Daddy, the second in command of the cult. One of her iconic moments comes when she plans to capture Abra Stone and keep her as a steam milk cow, instead of just killing her off and canning her steam. The reason being, they don't have enough canisters for the amount of steam she is capable of providing. As for Rose, I don't think she's pure evil. Instead, she is a part of a hood that is so corrupted to the core that it brings out the worst in her. Ferguson even admits she's so sexual and predatory and loving and caring, and she has all the elements of what a human being has that has all the elements of a zest for life. And that, mixed with a fucking great sense of style. Let's call a spade a spade. It's very liberating, getting all of these aspects in one character, coupled with her powers, like astral projection, telepathy, memory reading, and psychic detection. She nails the role of an odd Stephen King villain. Henry Bowers, It, Chapter 1 and 2. Henry, the leader of the Bowers gang, may not be given the on-screen justice that the books demand, but he is surely a terrifying villain you'd never want to cross paths with. The franchise traces his journey all the way from his early teens to his late 40s, and we watch him grow from being an elementary student to an inmate at the inmate patient at Juniper Hill State Correctional Facility, and finally, Pennywise's henchman, also called Hank and Banana Hills, and even Mullet-Wearing Asshole by Richie Tozier. Much of his identity is sourced from his traumatic past, eccentric madness, and a desperate need to be a bully. This also makes him the perfect little helpless puppet at the hands of the entity named It. Deeply prejudiced, he hates Mike Hanlon for being black. When the new kid Ben Hanscom prepares to leave the library, Henry ambushes him and attempts to carve his name on the poor kid's tummy. What a rogue. But Chapter 1 ends with Bowers falling down into the sewers, giving him the rightful fate he had coming all this while. But Chapter 2 opens with Bowers surviving the torrent of the water and returning home, only to find the police arrest him for homicide. It is with Pennywise's help that he escapes from prison, but then he has unsolved enemies and sudden attacks he was barely prepared for. Henry has a rich and tormented history, and I really wish his character was given more impact on how the narrative unfurls in the films. Anyway, his character is still a creative masterpiece, one that would create a niche in the hearts of Stephen King fans.
Shut up, you miserable buzzard!
You old bitch!
Mrs. Carmody, The Mist, 2007. Mrs. Carmody, the owner of an antique shop in Babington, Maine, is somewhere in her late 30s or 40s when the military opens the portal to another dimension at a curious experiment. The little town of Babington, Maine, gets covered in a mysterious mist, trapping people indoors. Mrs. Carmody was in the supermarket at the time, and she is stuck there with fellow residents. With her eccentricity and religious fanaticism, she is able to convince people around her that she is truly a prophet of God and is ordained with divine protection. Naturally, people start worshiping her. When the truth is revealed, she accuses the military of violating the natural order of God and opening up doors that are better left unopened. When Private Jessup reveals that he was aware of the Arrowhead Project, Mother Carmody simply throws him out of the store, only to have him killed by a terrifying arachne lobster. The grand perception of her invincibility that she built around herself comes crashing down when Ollie Weeks, the assistant manager, kills her and brings the group back to their senses. Mother Carmody's tale is a tale of delusion being contagious and pride clouding judgment. Her influence not only spreads to people around her, but also to the audience, who responded so well to the 2007 film adaptation that a TV series of the same name just had to be launched.
I'm going to kill you!
Percy Wetmore, The Green Mile, 1999. Serving at the Cold Mountain Penitentiary, Officer Percy Wetmore uses and abuses his authority, training, and the use of his nightstick. Despite being a supporting villain in the Stephen King universe, he is an awful menace of a person with the kind of corruption that you see him engaging with. He probably rose to this coveted position through his contacts. His aunt is the governor's wife. He now harasses death row inmates and breaks Edward Delacroix's fingers while crushing his new pet mouse, Mr. Jingles. This is just the trailer. After he learns how to use the electric chair on its victims, he intentionally deflects Delacroix's execution. Why? Just out of curiosity, just because he can, you know? So what happens to Delacroix in the end? Nothing much. He just bursts into deadly flames. On a serious note, Percy is now absolutely stunned at the horror he just committed. Violent and erratic, Percy has been accused of nepotism, psychological abuse, murder by proxy, and animal cruelty. Assault and blackmail seem to be his bread and butter as he spreads terror in the prison. As a supporting antagonist of the Stephen King multiverse, Officer Wetmore's character is unforgettable in The Green Mile and its film adaptation of the same name. Greg Stilson, The Dead Zone, 1983. Gregory Greg Amos Stilson is a villainous politician who becomes the President of the United States, initiates a nuclear war against the USSR, and commits mass genocide. It's no surprise that he has access to the entire resource of the state and would use it to pursue his own selfish interests. There was a photographer who took a photo of him that would likely finish his career. He tries to get the guy murdered and the evidence destroyed, but thankfully it was all in vain. He is also responsible for killing Johnny Smith, but it all started in his sales days, when he felt elated after beating a pet dog to a pulp and started believing that he was destined for great powers. His character transformation is quite riveting, as you watch an average loner become this reputed criminal who is afraid of nothing. He not only blackmails biker gang leaders into joining hands with him, but also becomes popular for curing delinquent teens with inhumane levels of torture. It is so ironic that he has to shield himself from gunfire by hiding behind a child. It ends with these visuals leaving an irreparable dent in his public image. Fans, however, cannot get enough of Greg Stilson, so he would return for a TV series of the same title in The Dark Tower as well. Even in the novel Cujo, he is the unseen antagonist that we crave to know more of. Marvelous verdict. Be it the origin story, the crisis to catalyze the journey, or the psychological profile, King has left behind a legacy of an ever-growing band of villains who form the fulcrum of evil in that realm. Each villain reminds us of a cultural relevance that resonates deeply with all that is inherently wrong in our society. Much of the horror and the pain that the characters want to usher into the world is a product of the horror and pain that we as people have inflicted upon those characters. These stories hit those notes that play in the uncharted territories of our minds as the actors bring their fears on the screen. In the end, these stories remind us that the evil isn't just born, it is birthed. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks, everyone.